Dear students, I welcome you in the online classes organized by ISP. This is our lecture number 6 in the subject of discourse analysis, and our topic for today is the types of discourse. But before going into the detail of today's lesson, let us try to connect today's lesson with our previous knowledge. We started with the definition and differentiation between text and discourse. Then we defined the concept of context and its types. We moved forward and we came to know that in order to study any stretch of language, we need to understand two elements. Number one, linguistic elements present within the text, and the schematic element of context. Now, in order to study the linguistic elements, we went through the cohesive devices which are present within the text and are also called formal links, and the schematic element of context is looking out of the text, looking beyond the text. And for that purpose, we went through the elements of communication and function of the language. But still, there was something more to be done in order to understand the stretch of language as discourse. So, we came to the conclusion that there are two kinds of meaning working side by side and parallel in every text. One is the semantic meanings, which are present within the text, and we understand them as soon as we go through the stretch of language. And the other ones are pragmatic meanings, which we can find out of the text, out of the stretch of language. And these meanings change with the application of the new context. So these meanings are not fixed, but these pragmatic meanings depend upon the context that we create in order to understand that stretch of language. Now, we move forward and we studied the principles of conversation. Two principles we know now: the principle of cooperation and the principle of politeness. Then, in our last lecture, we defined the speech act theory, and from the speech act theory we come to know that there are some situations in which saying is doing, means there are some functions which are performed or which can be performed by just uttering some words, by saying some words. And in such kind of functions and in such kind of situations, saying is like doing. We have taken some examples in order to understand the speech act theory, and we know that we have divided that speech act theory into two parts: the declarations and the performatives. Now we move on the same line, and there are some concepts that we have to define in the same speech act theory. But before going into the detail of those concepts, let us have a look on the outlines of today's lecture. The concept that I was mentioning were the concept of locution, illocution, and perlocution. These are very important concepts. And then we will also go through the types of discourse. Now, dear students, actually step by step we are moving towards a target. And our target is to analyze the discourse critically. And when we will have this skill, we will have this understanding to analyze the discourse critically. This would be our target and this would be our destination. And this is, of course, the destination of critical discourse analysis. And all these different stages, whether it was the elements of communication or the functions of language or the principles of conversation or this speech act theory, actually these are the steps which are moving towards that final destination of critical discourse analysis. Now, we are going to define today the concept of locution, illocution, and perlocution. Now, if I could remind you an example that we have taken in our lesson number 5, perhaps at the end of lesson number 5. And once again, I would like to remind you that the speech act theory was divided into two components, two parts. The first part was declaration and the second part was performatives. And we defined in the same speech act theory that in order to fulfill declarations and performatives, we need to fulfill some conditions. These conditions now we know are called facility conditions. These facility conditions are necessary in order to perform declarations and performatives. Now, in performatives, what I want to point out and what I want to remind you, in performatives, we have taken an example. And the example was the statement, clean your boots. If you could remember, the example was, clean your boots. Now this is a kind of order, and this belongs to the family of directives, as we have defined some families in performatives. One of these families was of directives. We know that there were other families like suggestives, permissives, etc. So clean your boot is a kind of order, and this order belongs to the family of directives. Now, we are going to build upon the same example of clean your boots in order to define the concept of locution, illocution, and perlocution. Now, keep in mind that in order to fulfill that act of performatives, that is clean your boots, we need some felicity conditions to be fulfilled. And what are those felicity conditions with this directive? That the person who is sender, who is ordering, should have authority, number one. And the second important felicity condition with it was that the person who is on the receiving end, who is the receiver, should be obliged to fulfill this directive. These were the two basic. We know that there are 4 felicity conditions, but at present you must keep in mind these 2 felicity conditions, that the person who is the sender should have some authority, and the person who is the receiver should be obliged to fulfill that directive. Keep these 2 conditions in mind, and now we are moving forward. Consider an example. We know that in military, a strict environment of discipline is observed. Now this is a kind of situation, a kind of supposition we are taking, and we are building up this context for our example. In military, we know that there is strict environment of discipline. Consider a situation in which army sergeant speaks to a newly recruited person just before the parade ends. Now this is the situation. The environment is of military, army, and we know this is a very disciplinary kind of environment. And there is sergeant of the army, and the other person is a newly recruited person, and the situation is that a parade is going to start. And what the sergeant is saying to this newly recruited person, this recruit, the sergeant says, "I think your boots need cleaning, mister." I repeat, I think your boots need cleaning, mister. Now these were the words uttered by the sergeant to a recruit just before the parade. Now, keep in mind the felicity conditions. In military, power relations are very clear. We know that there are the strong concepts of senior and junior in the environment of military. So naturally, here power conditions and relations are very much clear. Sergeant is in power and the recruit is on the receiving end. The rights and obligations are well established. So sergeant has a right because he has the authority, and recruit should be obliged to fulfill the orders, the directives from the sergeant. He is the receiver. So naturally, although if you observe the words, I think your boots need cleaning, this is not like clean your boots as we had gone through in our lecture number 5. Here the words are different. I think your boots need cleaning, mister. But in this situation, in a military situation, if some sergeant is saying these words to a recruit, it would be taken as order. So it is just equal to clean your boots. Now, what could be different answers that the recruit can make? The answer of the recruit may be, one of the answers may be this: I have been polishing all morning and they won't come any cleaner. Now this is the answer of the recruit, to whom an order was received by the sergeant. I have been polishing all morning and they won't come any cleaner. Now what has happened actually with this answer of the recruit? The recruit is trying to challenge the Pharisee condition. What was the Pharisee condition? The sergeant was in authority and the recruit must be obliged to fulfill the order. But here, by saying this, I have been polishing all morning and they won't come any cleaner. The recruit is actually trying to challenge the Pharisee condition of authority and obligation. The authority of the sender is established. He is the sergeant. But if you keep close eye on the answer of the recruit, it is an indirect challenge. He is not refusing anything. It is an indirect challenge. The direct answer means, I'm not going to clean them. That would be a very direct challenge and a kind of refusal. But the words of the recruit are, I have been polishing all morning and they won't come any cleaner. However, if he had a direct answer like, I am not going to clean them, that would lead to the charge of disobedience. But he has chosen such kind of words. Actually, those words are functioning same as the direct answer, but the choice of words has been made in such a way that it is a kind of indirect challenge. By speaking indirectly, the human beings exploit the situation to their advantage. Now, if you have understood this example, the recruit has indirectly refused to clean his boots and he has indirectly challenged the authority of the sergeant. Why do human beings do so? And most of the people ask why people speak indirectly, why they don't speak directly. Here is the answer. By speaking indirectly, the human beings exploit the situation to their advantage. What the recruit is trying to do, he has not cleaned his boots and now he is trying to exploit this situation. He has been caught by the sergeant, but he is trying to exploit this situation to his advantage by speaking indirectly. And he means that he has tried his best, but the polish has not done any advantage, whereas the cleaning of the boots is concerned. So that is why by speaking indirectly, he is trying to exploit this situation to his advantage. Secondly, they enable themselves to avoid committing the order, obeying the order. Means here in this example, the recruit is trying to avoid fulfilling the order. He has not refused directly, but by speaking indirectly, he is trying to avoid himself from obeying the order. The third advantage of speaking indirectly is they can retreat in front of the danger. So, here, when the people speak indirectly, they actually leave space for retreat, for stepping back. For example, even in this case, if the sergeant says, "What are you saying?" the recruit may step back may retreat because he has left this space for himself by speaking indirectly. So this is major reason of why people speak indirectly. These three: to exploit the situation, to avoid obeying the order, and to leave the space for retreat. These are the reasons why people speak indirectly. We also give others the option of retreat by speaking indirectly. So the situation is not exploited only by the receiver, but when you speak indirectly, sometimes you give other people the space for retreat as well. And the next example, we will see how we give others the space for retreat. Example: what is the difference between a person comes to you and say, "Are you busy?" That is one situation. But if the same person comes to you and say, "Sit down and talk to me," so in the second situation, the person has not left any space for you, and perhaps he has not left any space for himself for retreat. But in the first case, "Are you busy?" there is space for you to say that you are busy and you cannot sit down with him and talk to him. And at the same time, if you refuse, the person will have also an option and space to retreat. So by speaking indirectly, we are not only leaving space for ourselves to retreat, but we are actually giving space to the senders as well. Now from this example, that of the sergeant and recruit, we can define the concepts of locution, illocution, and perlocution. Why we have taken the example of the sergeant and the recruit? We have taken this example in order to define these three concepts. And if had I defined them directly, perhaps it would not be possible for many of you to understand these concepts. But I hope with this example, now the things would become easier for you. The speech act theory uses technical terms for the layers of intentions and interpretations. So what was the intention of the sergeant, and what was the intention of the recruit when he challenged the authority of the sergeant? For these concepts, speech act theory uses technical terms, and we are going to define these technical terms now. The first term is the locution. The formal literal meanings of the words, and we have taken the same example, and now you will benefit from that example in understanding these terms. So locution is the formal literal meanings of the words. Whatever the words have been uttered, the meanings of these words are called the locution. The statement of the recruit that he has been cleaning the boots all the morning, this would be locution. So these concepts are based upon the challenging words uttered by the recruit. So whatever the words he has uttered, this is the locution. And the illocution, the act performed by saying these words. What was the act the recruit has performed by saying these words? He has challenged the sergeant's order. That is illocution. So locution is the meaning of the actual words, and illocution is the act that has been performed by saying these words. And that is, he has challenged the sergeant's order. And the perlocution, overall aim of the discourse. What was the aim of the recruit when he uttered those words, when he challenged the authority of the sergeant? Undermining the authority of the sergeant. Number one, to be cheeky, to be naughty. to escape the duty. So this was the overall aim of the discourse which was uttered by the recruit. So this would be perlocution. Locution, the actual meanings of the words. Elocution, the act performed by uttering those words. And perlocution is the overall aim of the discourse. Now, we come to another topic, and that is the types of discourse. These are very simple types that we have been using for the division of discourse. Traditionally, discourse is divided into two major categories, and right from the start, we are mentioning these categories time and again. The spoken discourse and the written discourse. And it is based upon the production and reception. How do we produce this discourse and how do we receive discourse? From this we have made this division and these types of discourse. Now, first of all, spoken discourse. Spoken discourse is less planned, less orderly, more open to intervention. We know that when we speak, we do not plan what we are going to speak. Similarly, our speech is most of the time not orderly. And the receiver or the receivers can intervene in our discourse. And what do we use in spoken discourse? Mouth and ears. However, some spoken discourses have significant common features with the written discourses. These are spoken discourses, but some of their features are common with the written discourses. What are such discourses? Lessons. Because lessons are well planned and these are also orderly. And there is no danger of intervention in these lessons. Similarly, lectures, interviews, or trials in the courts, these are planned and orderly and nobody can interfere most of the time in such kind of discourses. So there are some spoken discourses with common features of written discourses, because these are planned and limited possibilities of intervention like in the written discourse. Now, written discourse, these are planned in contrast to the spoken discourse. These are orderly, no possibility of intervention. And in written discourse we use hands and eyes, and in spoken we were using mouth and ears. Reading a novel cannot influence its development. If some reader is reading a novel, is going through a novel, he or she cannot influence now its development. Whatever the plot that has been encoded by the writer in the novel, now a reader has nothing to do with it. So no intervention from outside. Sometimes the writers respond to the market. So this is some intervention, in some cases. The readers are influencing or intervening the discourse, because some writers respond to the market. They write whatever is the demand of the market. So demand of the market or demand of the readers is sometimes influencing this written discourse. Teachers may send back the essays to be rewritten. So sometimes teachers receive the essays and then they send back those essays because there are some faults or errors in those essays, and they demand them rewriting. So here there is some kind of intervention from the teachers. So in written discourse there might be limited kind of intervention as well. Now, what is formal and informal discourse? Formal discourse is planned, written as it might be written or spoken. And what are the examples of formal discourse? Literature, books, speeches, lectures, well planned, orderly. These are formal discourse. Informal discourse, unplanned, less formal. It may also be written or spoken, but predominantly spoken, because we have seen that the spoken discourse most of the time is unplanned and without order. And what are the examples of informal discourse? Conversation, dialogues, interviews, debates. These are the informal discourses. So these are some of the types that we should be familiar with. And with this, we come to the end of our lesson. However, as usual, I am going to set an exercise for you, and it is very interesting one. You have to define the concept of locution, elocution, and perlocution with the help of an example. You have to create an example. Just we have taken the example of the sergeant and the recruit. Please try to create an example from the common day life, and on the basis of that example, try to define the concept of locution, elocution, and perlocution. That was all from my side. Khuda Hafiz. Stay safe.